Hi, this is Anna Imagination with a Healing Garden, and welcome to Shifting Perspectives. One moment, let me play with my camera. If you are new to my channel, I am a philosopher, psychologist, sociologist of 30 years, and today I want to talk about a project that I'm working on and get you right into the introduction of this project. This is what I refer to as traumatic healing for the conscious parent. And let me get the precise wording up here because the title is spot on. The Millennials Guide for Ethically Strategic Parenting. So I don't know about you, but I had your classic 1980s parenting, which was a combination of over neglectful and over enabling. And it was like that gorgeous combination of either they were completely absent and oblivious or they were hands on and over parenting. What ended up happening with most people is we walk away from parenting with this concept of, well, I have a long list of what not to do, but you're still clueless as to what to do. And one of the things that I absolutely adore about millennials, I am one of the few people who absolutely love millennials. I mean, like, you are the power generation, and I am so excited for you. I could sit down and I have on my podcast, I have talked a lot about millennials. I have so much millennial love. It's disgusting. You're going to hate me by the end of this, unless you're a millennial, and that's okay because you are my people. So I'm going to explain to you first why millennials. I have to write when I talk. So the reason why millennials is because there's basically, when you look at sociology, when you look at the way society evolves, there are 12 stages of growth. I talk about these 12 stages a lot. And when you apply, when you understand these 12 stages, everything makes sense. Your brain makes sense. Your children make sense. Your parents make sense. People make sense. That weird guy at work makes sense. Everything makes sense. But it's more than that. If you look at society, the way we've evolved in the last 2,000 years, it makes sense. And when you look at where things are right now, from the 1950s up to present day, it makes sense. Like, these 12 stages of growth are the missing link of the human condition. It's extraordinary. So I took those 12 stages of growth and I plugged them into my traumatic healing. Now, with the 12 stages of growth, they exist over here. My work with traumatic healing was over here. So I took the 12 stages, and my traumatic healing is the how to evolve through the 12 stages. The 12 stages just define, well, it only defined the first 8 stages. So when you take my traumatic healing and the 12 stages and you plug them together, it's like a powerhouse of information. It's extraordinary. So this is how it works. Millennials. So let me clear my thoughts. In order to understand, basically misunderstanding, and that's really what it is. This is all a massive communication error. We are not taught how to communicate effectively. Our parents couldn't communicate with us. We couldn't communicate with them. There was a lot of misunderstanding. They didn't understand teenagers these days. We didn't understand them. There was just so much misunderstanding. And if you've noticed, and this is really it, if you look at every relationship we have, every interaction we have, either you get them or you don't. Either you understand or you don't. And there's almost this default, well, they're freaking crazy, or yeah, so either we label them and we throw them away, or we are happy because we vibe, we get each other, we connect. And that's really it. So what's happening when you understand somebody, when you're on the same vibe as somebody, that is layman's talk or common talk for you have a perspective gap. You're on the same perspective. That's all it is. So these 12 stages of growth are 12 milestones. They are mental milestones that we all go through life. Your children go through them, you go through them, your parents go through them. It is not possible to be a human person. It is not possible to be a cat or a dog. Animals go through this. The problem is animals are like at one. They're at one. And there are humans people who all evolve at different paces. And they are at stage 1. Sometimes they're at stage 2. Sometimes they're at stage 3. The majority of society burns out at stage 4, and then we stay there. Now, the majority of the people determines which of these perspectives is going to be the right perspective. And right at the moment, we are at stage 4. Everybody, like the majority, the go-to perspective right now is the 4th stage perspective. Our government is based off of this. Our textbooks are based off of this. Everything is based off of this. Now, there is this severe anti-education thing that's been happening for the last 500 years. You see this when you study sociology, where basically around the 1600s, it was, and it happened with, we created the printing press, and there was a whole lot of anger about that. A lot of anger, because how dare the people have access to books? That was strategic. And then a man by the name of, oh, I cannot remember his name. I never can remember his name. He was associated with Martin Luther in the Age of Enlightenment. I want to say his name is Tybalt. But that is so my subconscious mind borrowing from Shakespeare. Anyway, this man decided it would be a good idea to translate the Bible into English around the 1500s, 1600s. That created so much problem that they ended up killing him. Now, Martin Luther was also on that same wagon of, yeah, let's give the people the book. And that's where we see Lutheranism, and it split from the Catholic Church. The reason why this is important today is because that mindset and that mentality is still happening. It launched this massive concept of don't educate the people. Because if you educate the people will figure out what we're up to. It's this very much a hierarchy, very much a pecking order of these people want to control, which we know this. And in order to control people, they're easier controlled if they're uneducated. So they started pulling away education. They made it limited, they made it inaccessible. Every time there was a massive stride forward, it got pulled back. And around that time period, they cut philosophy out of most education programs. Philosophy just stopped existing, so that people who did pursue education, philosophy was not on the table. Philosophy became, almost after a few hundred years after that, a dead language, a dead subject to study. It was a very, very rare individual who pursued the study of philosophy. Now, philosophy actually is the study of a secret subject that was lost in the 3rd and the 4th century when Rome burned Alexandria. Rome burned Alexandria because they wanted to keep the subject secret. Again, if you study sociology, Romanology, Roman history, and psychology, all of that's there. So it's also in philosophy. So we lost the subject in the 4th century. And with it, our education went from like way up here, because Alexandria was the epicenter of wisdom and knowledge up until the 4th century. They were like the wisdom and the education capital of the world. And they destroyed it. Rome completely burned it down. And when they did that, the education level just tanked. So we've had to, like, education-wise, try and recover from that ever since. We are still recovering from that, which is why we saw the Dark Ages, is because we went from having this epicenter of education in the world in the 4th century to not at all. And it shows. So philosophy came out of our system around the 1600s. We lost all access to it for the most part. It was a very rare person who pursued it. Now, the following thing that happened after that was they started to cut back other subjects. In the 1980s and the 1990s, they did another massive cut where they removed most art from our schools. We saw that in the movie Mr. Holland's Opus, which was about this very problem, this very topic. And they did it again in the years 2000 to 2010, where again, they did another massive pay cut out of the art department, so that today there's little to no art being taught in schools. Now, the reason why this is so important is because art teaches you to think, teaches you to have imagination. It teaches you. There are 3 stages of education. There's mimicking behavior, there's repetition behavior, and then there's authorship. Most people don't make it past mimicking. Mimicking is when you see somebody behaving a certain way, so you repeat it. This is actually mindless, it's unconscious, and it's just monkey see, monkey do. We're talking very primitive type. We do this when we are 2 years old and 3 years old. That's when a little girl will copy mommy or a little boy will copy daddy. And why am I talking in genders? You get the idea, though. It's where a child will mimic the parent's behavior to emanate them. That's mimic behavior. After that, you're supposed to get into repetition behavior, which is just another stage of education. And our children go through that. You see that again. But then it stalls out, and then we never advance anywhere. So, between the third stages of education with this massive stall out at repetition behavior, that's when you just repeat the words or you repeat the stories, but you don't actually internalize it. Internalization doesn't happen until the third stage. And that is when you become your own author, creating your own ideas. In order for that to happen, you have to activate the higher thinking in your brain, which isn't being done basically today at all. It's just not being done. And the reason why is because you need art to pull that off. You need art and philosophy to pull that off. Bottom line. So you have philosophy and you have art that activate that third stage of learning. Now, you can still activate it. It's going to be harder. It's going to take longer. And it doesn't happen as frequently. So you have these flukes of people, random people who every now and then it clicks on and they figure it out. They're the ones who are able to look around and go, something's up. Now, I'm going to be very blunt. Most millennials have this. It's natural evolution. You're at the fifth stage. We'll be going over that later. But that's what's going on with millennials is as we advance and as we evolve, we get smarter and smarter with every generation. Compliments of Darwin's theory. Yes, it's the way we evolve. It's just how we grow. It's just the way the human brain is. So what we saw was you have all these generations. I'm going to pull up my little thing here, my little map. Let's pull up the generations because it's the silent generation. And once you sit down and you look at this, let me take a look. Blah, 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 blah. I want my graphs. So here's how this works. We have, beautiful, beautiful. So we have baby boomers, and then we have Gen X, and then we have millennials, and then we have Gen Zs. Now, the baby boomers are children to the silent generation, and they are the ones I want to talk about first. So the silent generations were born between 1930 and 1940. And then the baby boomers were born between 1950s to 1960s. These are approximations. Gen X are between 70s and 80s, and millennials were born between 1980 to 2000. And then we have Gen X or Gen Z, who's between 2000, let's say 2005, 2015. Yeah, 2005 to 2010. And the next one after that is the alpha generation. So here's how this works. This is what it means for our society. Basically, baby boomers are stage 4. So they basically reach stage 4 and they're done. Their parents were stage 3, stage 4, stage 3. And then they evolved to stage 4 and they tapped out. They're like, they did no more evolutional growth. Their brains did not evolve. It's that concept of, you know, how fast you grow from the point how fast you grow from the point of your birth all the way up until you're about 50 years old. And that, well, not even 50, 30 years old, 20 years old. It's like as soon as you get out of high school, you stop growing. You're done. You're done. And then if you go to college, your brain grows a little bit more, and then you never really learn anything after that point. That's the general consensus. And this was the mindset of the silent generation and later the baby boomers. It's this real concept of your brain doesn't grow and you stay the exact same way you are from the point of high school all the way to death. Yeah, that's their mentality. And what ends up happening is they're not evolving, but that's not true. They only reached the 4th stage of growth, and there's 12. I'm going to be going over in a moment exactly what happens at each stage, and that's when it really plugs in. So the Gen X generation came along, and Gen X is stage 5. Now, stage 5 is always a transition. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, it's transitional. It's as if it's decision time. Really, it's stage 5, you get to stage 5 and it's decision time. Now, ironically, not ironically, it's psychology. It's amazing. Gen X is also a transition generation where it's decision time. It's like you have to choose sides. So you have, it was this meme I saw. I'm going to pause here for a minute and go over to this meme I saw. The baby boomers versus the millennials. And they both forget, this is the meme, quote unquote. Everyone's forgotten that there's a generation in between that hates them both. It's amusing, but at the same time, it's actually a little, let's tweak it. The Gen X and stage 5 chooses sides every time. And basically, when you get to stage 5, the table starts to turn. You value comfort or growth. Every person. You either value comfort more than growth, or you value growth more than comfort. Bottom line, every person has to make this choice. Do you prefer comfort or do you prefer growth? Now, some people like to toggle, and that's okay too. Welcome to that. Welcome to this is stage 5. They're the people who say, you know what, I think I'm going to enjoy comfort for a while and then I'll grow. Those are people who actually do prioritize growth, but they also value the beautiful balance and appreciation of self care. So they're actually growers. And then you've got people who just, nope, nope, I like my comfort at no expense. Now, that is your baby boomer mentality. That is also your stage 5 mentality who favors comfort. Millennials don't. Millennials love growth. They know the world is messed up. They know that they can do better. They have answers, and if they don't, they are pursuing them. Millennials value growth, and they don't care about comfort. They know that they can stop, do a little bit of self-care, get that comfort, recharge, and then boom, grow some more. That's why I love millennials. They are the generation that said, fuck this shit, we're going to rewrite the system, which is why baby boomers hate them. It's because baby boomers are going, but I made this system. This is my system. That's right. The system is completely designed to appease the baby boomer who loves comfort and doesn't value growth. So no one's questioning, no one's curious, no one's doing anything. They have their comfort zone, and it's causing them to go stagnant and stale, and there's no development. If anything, they're cutting our art departments. Now, you've got Gen X in the middle of that. I'm a Gen Xer. I was born 1980. So here we are in the middle of this. And you got to choose sides. You got to choose sides. Gen X's will do one of two things. Either they will go the comfort route or they will go the growth route. If they go the comfort route, they are a Gen Xer who leans more toward baby boomer. I call them baby boomer Gen Xer, boomer Xers, basically. The other type is the Gen X who leans toward the millennial side, and that's me. That's where we gravitate toward wanting growth, wanting to help and nurture the millennial because they are the hope for the future to get us out of this shithole, because we understand what's been done to the society. So you have a divide with the transitional 5 stage, the 5th stage, or the Gen X. There's this split that happens. Now, millennials are coming along, and as I said, they're looking at everything going, what the hell is going on? And they are, for the most part, a millennial is being born at the 5th stage, almost right away. They come into the world at the 5th ethical stage. So they're ready to go. They already value growth. They're already set to go. They're already on this pursuit of let's make this better. Now, going back to the silent generation, going back to the baby boomer generation, we're looking at 3s and 4s. Now, this is a group that I like to refer to as foundational because they are the foundation of a society and a culture, and they really are. Now, with the 12 stages of growth, what these are really is these are ethical milestones that a human being reaches with intellectual knowledge. So when you learn something, you have all of these factors in that weigh in. The first one is your ethical metric. The second one is your intellectual knowledge. That's what you actually know from books. There's also your trial and error. That's really important that we emphasize trial and error. And then the other one is just life experience. Now, when you hit each one of these milestones, when you have the accumulation, that magic, all 4 numbers hitting, you hit a milestone, you earn a moral lesson from that. And that moral lesson actually provides you with an ethical core that will dictate your perspective. There isn't one perspective. The 4th perspectives love you to think so. The baby boomers are adamant that there is only one perspective, and that's the problem. 5th perspectives are going, no, there's multiple perspectives. You have a closed mind. You need to open your mind and tolerate other people's perspective. And that is the lost subject of philosophy. Perspective was actually what was taught at Alexandria. Once you understand the depth of perspective and how abused it is, how valuable it is, how diverse it is, your tolerance, all of our tolerance for it significantly skyrockets. And that's what's been going on. Fifth perspectives, because they value education and growth, have become aware that there are multiple perspectives and all of them must be respected. That's your fifth and sixth perspective. It is a lesson that fourth perspectives and under have not learned. Foundationals cannot grasp this concept because they are mental children. These stages of growth are supposed to happen in a properly parented environment at ages 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means your average baby boomer who's about 65, 70 years old now has the mindset of a 4-year-old. That's what's going on. They've stunted their own growth because they don't value growth. They prioritize comfort. And as a result, they stunted their own mental development, sticking them at age 4 years old. At 4, you learn things like, well, let's go back to age 1. When you are born, you have your authority and your identity. Now, if you are a parent, this is really important. This is how it applies to your child. This is it. When your child is born, when you are born, we are all born with our authority and our identity. Now, this gorgeous little mass of a human being has not yet had the ability to observe. So it uses the first stage of education, mimicking, to learn and process so that it can develop communication skills. And the goal, the mission of a human person at a very young age is to excel at basically mirroring, repetition, and then communicating so it can define its own authority. But when you have a bunch of baby boomers who feel that everyone has to be the same, that doesn't happen. So there's a lot of interference with nature. And this is really it. It is nature's natural way of having our evolution go. And then there's man's way of wanting it to go according to the rules. So you have a lot of societal expectation that man, mostly baby boomers, are holding over their children to say, this is how you're supposed to grow and develop. So says the rules. In the meantime, nature has its own agenda, and it's these 12 stages of growth. They have to be learned in order. They will be learned in order. They will be learned according to whatever milestone a person is at. And if you don't internalize the lessons, you get stuck at that mindset and you never go. You never get better. You never advance. You never evolve. Now, there are certain things that have to take place, which is your ethical metric, your intellect, your trial and error, and your life experience. All of that requires autonomy. It requires authority. It requires safety. And that's the problem. With the amount of abuse that's out there, discouragement, approval, there's a lot where a person doesn't feel safe enough to grow, safe enough to speak, safe enough to evolve. And this stunts the child's growth. So now, millennial, you come into life and you've got children of your own and you're wanting to make sure your child grows properly according, and you just have a long list of what not to do. It's really important that you understand that your child has authority and identity already assigned to them. Now, the problem is, and most parents think this way, I am a mother of 3, I get it. I want to keep the child safe. Now, this is where it's really, really important that we check this in place. If you were like everybody else, you probably were abused and traumatized as a child, which means that your own mental makeup is not ideal because your parents abused, neglected, or overparented you. So what that ends up doing is basically they projected their insecurities onto you. And that's what parented you, not your parents. What you got parented with was a traumatized projection. So as a result, you are now a walking bundle of projected abuse, projected insecurity. And that is what we parent our children with. Our projected abuse is the parent here. This is where bad parenting is passed on. This is the problem. When you go through mental healing and mental health, that stays in check. You basically correct that. So you get rid of the projected abuse and you pick up something else called boundary setting, where I'm going to make sure that my projected traumas stay with me. I'm not going to internalize the problems of other people. And I'm going to act as a boundary referee for my child to make sure my child will develop properly without my own garbage being dumped and projected onto them. It is when a parent projects their problems onto a child, or the parent, in almost too many cases, a parent will use their child as an emotional prosthetic rather than dealing with their own issues. So suddenly, this infant literally gains the responsibility of completing the adult. Or worse, this child becomes the responsibility of the emotional regulation of the parent. We see that a lot. That leads to significantly bad parenting. So, throughout the course that I'm going to be working with you on, through the Conscious Parent, the Millennials Guide for Ethical Strategic Parenting, one of the things we're going to be covering is making sure that first, you make sure that you're not using your child as an emotional prosthetic. It makes sure, it basically keeps in check that you have your own boundaries and that you are keeping your emotional baggage off of the child. Under no circumstances should you ever use a child for any kind of your own responsibility. It's making sure that the responsibility of you stays with you so that the child can be free to have their own authority and identity preserved and protected by you so that they can grow and develop as nature intended. While we go over what you can do with your child to make sure that your child develops properly, in addition, we will also be going over it with you to make sure that you structure your life and your parenting around the milestones that you should have learned. The 12 stages, the first 6 ethics are the core to basic human management, whereas the full 12 opens up a whole nother. Let's just get through the first 6 stages. Once you get through the first 6 stages, nature takes over. Nature will literally, nature takes over and it just goes. You kind of don't need triadic healing after the 6th stage because nature has taken over and you just evolve naturally. And that's one of the things I cover in triadic healing is it teaches you how to manage this and how to navigate it properly so that you get out of nature's way so that nature can do what nature needs to do. But it's really important as a parent that you also allow the same freedom for your child. Now, this does not mean your child is going to hurt themselves. It does not mean that the child is going to go about doing whatever. It's basically making sure that the child does not project its issues onto other people, and other people cannot project their problems onto the child. It also, your role is going to be guiding the child, not enabling them, guiding them so that they learn how to self-regulate. That's your first ethic. They learn how to become resourceful. That's your second ethic. They learn how to trust people. Third ethic. And they also learn how to accept their own limitations so they can fall back on a community if they need to. That's the third ethic. My favorite fourth ethic is self-government, which the fourth perspective baby boomer never learned, which is why the baby boomer is so dependent upon the government because they cannot govern themselves because they never learned the fourth ethic. They never learned how to self-govern. Millennials are really spot on and gung-ho about that. Yes, I can self-govern. And that's everything a millennial is. They know how to self-govern, do they? That's why I love them so much. But the fifth ethic, the fifth stage that needs to be learned is accountability. Again, something else the baby boomer never learned was accountability. Now, they confuse accountability with responsibility, and that's the problem. In addition, they also do a lot of projecting their own responsibility onto the child because they're not accountable. nor can they self-govern. You can't know accountability until you know self-government. So there's a lot of smoke and mirror show from the baby boomer where they insist they're accountable. They insist they're responsible when in fact they're not. That's called gaslighting and self-delusion because they haven't learned the basic ethics. When you internalize these ethics, oh, your perspective changes and you step away from the government, you step away from the society because you can think independently from the government. And that's where we see a lot of baby boomers not able to pull that off. The sixth perspective is when you become, it's actually at the end of the fifth perspective. You realize because you're accountable, one of the symptoms, side effects of accountability is understanding that your actions affect other people, but not just people, everything, the environment, animals, other species. Suddenly you become very mindful over how your actions impact everything. So to make sure to compensate, we see this a lot in all the perspectives. There's always overcompensation with every perspective. Every time you end a perspective, we go the extreme. It's very, very normal. And then we kind of calm down. And I'll be going over that later. But basically what happens is once you realize that you're accountable and you can see all the things you've done to other people, all the damage, and there's this guilt battle that a lot of people have to overcome. So to overcompensate, they jump to this extreme of putting everybody on a pedestal at the expense of themselves. Martyrdom. We see this a lot with six perspectives. The sixth perspective ethic is understanding that you are as valuable as the world around you. So it puts you, the sixth perspective lesson to be learned is that they are as valuable as everybody around them. Once you get to that point, the game changes. Everything changes. So this, I'm going to wrap it up here, but this is very much the conscious, this is the conscious parent, the Millennials Guide for Ethically Strategic Parenting. So this is basically the introduction. I'm going to be writing out the full introduction and laying all this out. So, and I love partnering it with a YouTube video. So if you want to jump in back and forth between the reading material or this, the reading material is pretty much going to have a lot more elaborate. That's where I pull my logic, philosophy, psychology, and physics, and I bring it all together. That way you can see the layout of all of it. We are going to be covering emotional management. We are going to be covering self-care, self-regulation, and it's going to literally be walking you through the 12 stages of growth systematically so that you will be learning and internalizing them if you haven't already, and making sure that your child also learns them. So there's every chapter is going to have like 3 parts to it. It's going to be you learning it for you, and then you teaching it how to teach it to your child. And example is the best way. Example. And I'm going to be covering how the human brain works as far as the 3 stages of learning, because you have a child who's already mimicking, already repeating you. So if you already have children, by you correcting, you're already a role model. As a parent, you become a role model. And as a result, a role model actually taps into our ability to observe and prioritize, because you are the point of relativity, the reference point for your child of what's right and wrong, what should and shouldn't be. So the more you do this for yourself, the more you're actually shaping yourself into an ideal role model for your children. And they will instinctively, naturally mirror you. You will become something that they will then respect, truly. And they will just naturally start to repeat you. So by focusing on yourself more and just setting yourself up for this kind of a stages of growth and plugging in these stages of growth that you lost or never got when you were a child, it corrects everything. It's extraordinary. And then I'm going to be bringing in traumatic healing in case you have any trauma that you need to process. I'll be covering that as well, so that you'll also be basically processing your trauma without all of the trauma dumping. I'll be showing you how to do that with the 12 stages. And the more you solidify your own foundational you, the better of a role model you become for your children, no matter what ages they are. And you will have an understanding of what they are going through, of what they're doing for their authority and their identity, and how you can parent in such a way that you don't interfere with nature's path, basically. It keeps you out of nature's way. and it allows you to parent effectively and healthy and ethically. So thank you so much. If you love videos like this, like, subscribe, follow, comment below, and let me know if any of this resonated with you. If you want to know more about me or if you want to learn more about the program, take a look at the link below. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.